Hello, and we are live on time today for today's session on working with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. Thank you for tuning in. And actually with that, I will just hand it over to our instructor, Sydney Andrews, because he's got a lot of cool stuff to show you today.
All right, Matt, you hyped me up a big game, so that means I got to really bring the stuff today. So welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited to continue to talk to you about graph and authentication development using MStyle.js, the Graph Toolkit, and some of these other really awesome tools that we'll be showcasing throughout this series. Today is a really interesting and fun day because this is the day where I do the most demos in the least amount of code, which may sound absolutely crazy, but today we're going to focus on the Graph Toolkit, which is a really awesome library that comes with components that you can use in your Angular, React apps, that you can use in vanilla JavaScript applications, comes with components that you can use in extensions that you build for Teams, Office products, SharePoint. The idea here is that the Graph Toolkit is a really great way for you to get in, add graph features to your applications very quickly without a lot of custom code or a lot of custom development. They are extensible, and I will show a little bit of that extensibility, but today is really just about showcasing the power of these toolkit components. So I'm going to just run through the introduction slides real quick, and then I want to get right into the meat of the demo. So once again, I'm Sydney Andrews. I'm an Azure MVP, Microsoft Certified Trainer. I'm going to be your presenter today. If you got questions, we have a Q&A panel. Please, add a comment, add a question. We'll try to answer them, but we are all human on this team, so we may miss a question or we might give you an answer. You say, that's not a concrete or a definite enough answer. msusdev@microsoft.com. Once again, that's msusdev@microsoft.com. Email us if you need a question answer, point to another video in the series, or just help above and beyond what we're showing you today. All of the demos and source code that we're showing in this video is going to be available on GitHub. That's msusdev/Microsoft Identity Platform Dev. That's our GitHub repo. That's where we're going to be putting the source code and all demo scripts. And Matt's already placed that in the Q&A. So this is part 2 of a 4-part series, whereas the first session was about taking JavaScript applications and authenticating users to Azure Active Directory with the mstyle.js library. Today, we're going to look at the Microsoft Graph Toolkit and some of the components of that Graph Toolkit and just jump right in and look at what we can do with those components and how they can enhance our applications. We have 2 more sessions after this. We're going to have one where we use that mstyle.js library to authenticate to other Azure services, such as Azure Storage. And then we'll have a session where we'll use the Graph SDK to do actual coding, so manual requests to the Microsoft Graph using a really great and sophisticated library. Promise not a lot of slides. So this is the last slide. That's our agenda for today. So I'm going to just really quickly review the Microsoft Graph and look at the Graph Explorer and look at some examples of types of things you can query using the Graph. Then we'll dig into the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. How does it work? And then I'm going to introduce you to a tool that you can use for the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. What is it called? Story. I can't remember what it's called. Storyboard or what it's called. This tool will allow you to try in browser the Graph Toolkit so you can figure out what you're trying to do and if you can accomplish it with the Graph Toolkit long before you actually try to connect to your own directory. Then we're going to take the Graph Toolkit and we're going to implement them in a vanilla JavaScript application. And then we'll do the same thing with a React application. So it's a busy agenda for today. I'm going to go ahead and get started by showing you our context for today. So I have an application registration. I just called it Sydney example. I've already, as a user, have granted it permission to access things like my calendar, my to-do list, my profile. And so I have a client ID, and I'm going to be using that throughout this entire series. Now, if you wanted to create your own application registration, normally I say go back and look at the first session, which is recorded and available on YouTube. But I'll just show you what you need to do. You just go to New Registration. Give it a name. So for register application, I'll call this Easy Demo Reg. For account types, right now, because we're using a Graph Toolkit and we're going to use it with the default settings, we can configure it for any type of account, whether it's a personal Microsoft account or organizational account. Now, you can always configure the toolkit so it only allows organizational accounts, or only allows personal accounts, or only allows accounts of your specific Azure AD tenant. But today, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to select this so I don't have to do any additional configuration. For my redirect URI, I'm going to debug in the browser. So I'm going to create a single page application. We're going to redirect to localhost 8080. And if you've seen the first session, that's what I've been using with HTTP server as my default port. So I hit register, and that's how I create an application that I can use for all the demos for today. But again, I've already went through the trouble of creating one called Sydney Example that has a client ID already, and this one's what we're going to use today. I just wanted to walk you through how you'd register application if you needed to, especially for those who weren't here for the first session. So without further ado, I'm going to go to docs.microsoft.com. And every link I type in this browser, I'm going to go ahead and paste in Q&A. So docs.microsoft.com/graph. And this is going to take me to the documentation for the Microsoft Graph. So I'm going to post this into Q&A. And for the Microsoft Graph, it's one of those things is if you've never used it before, it can be a little bit confusing what it is. And since this is mostly developer audience, I feel like I can be a little bit more specific when I describe it than I have to describe it to some of the other audiences I talk to. The Microsoft Graph is a series of webhooks or REST APIs that allow you to connect to all the different experiences and data on Microsoft 365, whether that's emails, calendars, OneDrive, SharePoint, to-do lists, your own profile information, all the way down to something as specific as your profile picture, all the way up to something as complex as your entire calendar. The Microsoft Graph gives people secure access to all of that data. So if you want to build an experience for your organization, so for example, maybe I want to, and somebody said can't read the screen, I will zoom in. We're doing a different resolution today. Hopefully that'll work better. If you cannot read the screen, just let me know in the Q&A and we will bump up the resolution. But the cool thing about the Microsoft Graph is I can build applications within my organization that extend upon the data that we've already collected and have. If I'm building an administration application for a call center, well, if we're already using Microsoft 365 and all of our users have an email address, they use Outlook to access their email, then I already probably have a profile photo, first name, last name, an email address for them. So when I built my own custom application, to be able to pull for that data and use that as opposed to building new profile information and new stuff for every single application, just makes a ton of sense. And in the past, you could have done that, but it was very complex and very difficult because every product had its own SDK and own libraries. There was inconsistencies across the different products. So Microsoft Graph, it's been around for a while, but what it has done is created a single unified API across everything in Microsoft 365. So it's great because now once you learn how to use the Microsoft Graph for one product, you can use it for ad infinitum products, right? So there's lots of services in Microsoft Graph, things like, your user information connected to identity features, productivity, such as like OneDrive, SharePoint for files, Outlook for mail and calendar, OneNote data, Excel, Microsoft To-Do. There's a couple here not on here, like Microsoft Planner. Oh, it is Microsoft Planner, Microsoft SharePoint for site and list data. You can even connect to Teams data and query things like the type of calls and types of meetings are happen. As a matter of fact, I think I saw a really amazing demo to Graph where somebody showed a real-time chart they built using Graph data on how much time people are spending every day on Teams meetings versus how much time they were actually working. They were using a combination of counting the amount of hours versus play at meetings and also counting presence data. And all of this was available because the Microsoft 365 data all is surfaced through the Graph. So it's a pretty great tool for you to use. But I didn't come here to show you documentation. I came here to show you how you can get started working with the Graph. And that's by going to aka.ms/GE. GE is short for Graph Explorer. I'm going to put that in the Q&A too. So aka.ms/GE, that's the Microsoft Graph Explorer. And this is great because what it allows us to do is test the graph. Now, I haven't signed into the Graph Explorer yet. So by default, I have a fictional persona. And this is the same one you'll see if you go to the Graph Explorer for the first time. So I can start making requests to endpoints. Like maybe I want to get my profile data. It's going to make an HTTP GET request to graph.microsoft.com version 1.0/me. And that allows me to make a request. It's a GET request. There's no request body. Came back pretty decently fast to get my profile information as a JSON object. And the great thing about this is now that I know how to access this, I can start building applications that are really powerful, because I could pull stuff like your job title, your email, maybe your phone number, maybe your location, all sorts of really interesting stuff that's already captured by essence of us using Microsoft 365. And I'll go into this a lot more in further sessions, but it also gives you code snippets. So if you want to use the Graph SDK in C#, JavaScript, or Java, it says, hey, here is the equivalent code in those SDKs. And later on, when we get to the Graph Toolkit, it'll even show you, here's how to do the equivalent query using the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So here, I just pulled profile information for this fictional persona. It's all sorts of other things we could do. So if I go and I say I want to pull my photo from my profile, I notice that it goes from me /photo / $value, and this gets the image as, I believe it's a data image. So it's not like, it doesn't give you a URL. It actually gives you the image. So we could download the image. We could look up me /messages, gets this person's email information. So if you want to query your email messages in Outlook, if you want to see all the items you have in OneDrive, you can do that. And again, all this is based upon mstyle.js. So, excuse me, all this is based upon Microsoft Identity Platform, which is using mstyle behind the scenes. So a lot of the stuff we learned in that first session is applicable here. And so again, this really makes things great for us. So I'm going to just show a couple things. So these are just the getting started, the most common things people are looking for. But if you go down, you can go down by workload and look up other things. Like for instance, I could say, let's look at Outlook calendar and get all of my events for this week. And it'll give me JSON data showing all the events that are scheduled for this week. So for example, here's a subject new product regulations touch point. And then the preview of the body, which is what you normally see in the event, not the entire body of the event, but just the preview. Important sensitivity, is all day, is canceled, is organizer, all sorts of stuff that you can query and deal with in your application to decide what you need. Let's look at two more examples. Let's go to OneDrive. Let's get all the items in my OneDrive. So again, I'm using the fictional persona. But I'm looking in, it has something called attachments. There's the URI to get to it. And it looks like it's a type folder. So this is a folder named attachments. It also has another folder, I believe this is a folder, called business data, which has 6 children. And then another folder called class documents. And this is all at that me drive, which gets my OneDrive, the root of OneDrive, and then all the children of that root. I can get recent files by going to me drive, goes my OneDrive, and they're recent. This says that my most recent file I modified was fabricum.1. Looks like it's a file, not a folder. So there's some file system info and interesting things that I can query about that. And then we can do that with other workloads. Like just real quick, I'll just show Microsoft Planner. Here's Microsoft Planner, get planner plan, all buckets of planner plan. You know what? Give me all my planner tasks. Well, I have a Northwind HR training video, part 1, that I need to handle. Okay, I need to make sure I handle that. Office move planning, 50% complete. I need to go ahead and deal with that too. And just scrolling down, I'm just scrolling quickly. Feature request tent control. Not even sure what that is, but that is really just some of the surface area we can do with the Graph Explorer. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm going to show you everything in the Graph Explorer today. I'm highly encouraging you. I put this in the Q&A to go to aka.ms/ge. That's the Graph Explorer's URL, and play with the Graph Explorer yourself. And when you're ready and comfortable, you can sign into the Graph Explorer using your own account. So I'll sign in using my account. And now any requests I make are in the context of my user and not that fictional user. So I don't have anything in Microsoft Planner. I think I might have a to-do task. So hit run query. Yeah, I do have a to-do. I have a task list, but there's nothing in the task list. Oh, I don't have any to-do tasks. I'm not going to get my email, but I might pull up my profile information. Yeah, Sydney Andrews, Cloud Applications Consultant. I can pull up my profile photo. So there we go. There's my profile photo. I can maybe pull up metadata about my photo. So I hit run query and see that my photo is a 504 by 504. Media is a JPEG image. And then an E tag, so I know if it's been changed or not. If like maybe I want to update my profile photo, or maybe I build a web application where the user can add a border or some type of flair to the profile photo. And so when we pull it, we get the E tag. And then when I go to update the profile photo after the user's edited, I check the E tag to make sure it hasn't been updated on the server since I pulled it. So lots of really cool stuff here that you can already think about application workflows. Somebody says, hey, so the graph, does it get some of this information from AAD or does it get it from elsewhere in Microsoft 365? The answer is both. So for a while, Azure Active Directory, a lot of that information wasn't quite ready in the graph, but now you can get a lot of AAD information around identity, security, user information. You can pull a lot of that stuff that you normally have to use a REST API connected directly to AAD to use, all that surfaced through the graph. So we can use the graph to extract a lot of information from AAD, and the amount of information you can get off the graph is growing daily. Just to put it in context, the last time I delivered this webinar, there was still some limitations on what you can grab from AAD. And there was a lot of stuff where I was like, you can grab this, but you can't grab that quite yet. It's mostly Microsoft 365, not as much AAD stuff. And now a lot of the stuff that when we delivered the session almost half a year ago, I think it was a little bit longer than half a year ago, that we weren't able to get is in the graph now. So when we went to Microsoft Graph, we saw, I believe it's under Identity Access Management. We can actually grab a lot of Azure AD content directly through the graph. So just for fun, I'm going to make an announcement in Q&A where I share a hyperlink that takes you to the documentation page talking about all the things Azure AD related that you can grab through the Microsoft Graph. So again, one API for all the workloads that you want to do to access your experiences and data in Microsoft 365. And you notice I don't just say data, I say experiences and data, because there's a lot of stuff that's more tasks. So the graph isn't just querying Microsoft 365. You can use the graph to manipulate Microsoft 365. So for example, you might want to create new events automatically. You might want to build your own custom application now, add events to people's Outlook calendars, or maybe you want to create a really cool application that runs every time a Microsoft Teams call with certain characteristics ends. Not only does the graph provide API endpoints, it provides lots of webhooks to respond to events. It provides a lot of put, post, and patch operations for you to actually manipulate data on Microsoft 365. So this is far away from just a query or read-only experience. Looking at one more Q&A question. Somebody says, hey, if we register our app with AAD and we use MSI.js, can we use that to call the graph? Absolutely. So if you haven't seen session number 1, that's exactly what we wrapped up session number 1 with. Matt's been gracious enough to post that link in the Q&A, but basically the first session in this series, we used the MSI.js library to authenticate a user based upon the application registration we had in Azure Active Directory. And then once that user is authenticated, we made a request to the graph to get their profile information. So we have done that. It's in session number 1. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. So the graph you're going to notice is kind of really tied into everything here. We got one more Q&A question. Somebody says, if I'm looking for a user's roles, can I get that through the graph? I know you can get users and groups. I know the group information from Azure AD you can query, and I know you can query up specific user information. So I hope that's enough for what you're trying to do with your situation in Q&A, but yeah, I know you can get user and group information through the Microsoft Graph. I have done that before. All right, so we checked out the Graph Explorer, but let's get to the meat of what we're talking about today, and that's the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So it's going to be docs.microsoft.com, Graph, just like we were going to the Graph documentation. This time we'll type in Toolkit, and I'm going to go to the overview page that gives me all the documentation about that. And just for fun, I'll put that link in the Q&A too. I'm just flooding you with links today because lots of stuff for you to follow up on after the session. Now, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit is a selection of libraries that give you components that are framework agnostic to work with the Microsoft Graph, to the point that you can just put in an HTML component and then immediately have an application that looks native to Microsoft 365 and uses Microsoft 365 features. So what do I mean by that? So if you're building your own application, users expect any type of information you're pulling from Microsoft 365 to look a certain way, right? And so one of the cool things you'll find out is that when you're using the Graph Toolkit, a lot of the toolkit components already look like the same exact components used in other Microsoft applications. So if you, even though you might be building a custom business application, if you want the user to feel comfortable and know they're signing in with their Microsoft organizational account, you can use these Graph Toolkit components to do that. If you need to rebrand them, customize them, they have custom CSS properties and a full templating engine so that you can completely customize the look and feel and the structure of these components to serve your needs without having to worry about the underlying code that actually makes the graph request. So the Graph Toolkit is a really amazing tool. And I think even when I have applications where I build lots of custom components and make custom graph requests, anything that I can use the Graph Toolkit to not have to develop and manage just makes my life a whole lot easier. So the Graph Toolkit, you can use it with vanilla JavaScript app, you can use it with a React, use it with Angular app. It's ideal if you want to build like an Electron app, a progressive web app. If you want to build something that integrates into SharePoint Teams or other features of Microsoft 365, where you can build custom applications, it's really great for getting in there. Now, for this overview documentation, they have links at the bottom, and it's going to take you to your first tutorial for using the Graph Toolkit and the Graph Toolkit Playground. So I'm going to show you all of those. So aka.ms mgt, or that's short for Microsoft Graph Toolkit, aka.ms mgt will take you to GitHub, to the Microsoft Graph Toolkit repository, just in case you actually want to jump in and look at the code, contribute to it, or just look at in real time their progress and what's coming out. For example, there's a new preview version of the MSAL2 provider. That's pretty cool. I'm going to put that link, like I've done with every other one, aka.ms mgt, into the Q&A. And then the next link I wanted to show you is MGT, short for Microsoft Graph Toolkit. You'll see that a lot, .dev. And this takes you to the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground. I'll put this in the Q&A too. Lots of links today. All right, so the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground is a place where you can go and play around with the toolkit components. There's so many of them, and it's so much fun. So we're going to just start at the top. There's a login button. I'm going to zoom in. MGT login. That's it. That's how you create a login button. Once the user's logged in, it'll show their name, and then they can click on that if they want to sign out. If they're not signed in, it'll just have the text login, and it'll function like a button. I wish I could tell you it's a whole lot more complex to set up. That's it. You want to add login to your page? That's all you have to do. Once the user's logged in, you can start adding in features. Like, for instance, what if I just wanted to show them some information about themselves? I can use MGT person. Now, if I just type in MGT person with nothing else, it'll just show me a blank person since it doesn't have any context. So for MGT person, the first thing I could do is set like what person are we talking about. So that's called person query. Now, remember when we did the Graph Toolkit, we went to the me input to get my profile information. That same query goes here. You can put in other queries. So for example, if you want to use person components to list out everyone in the organizational chart who's a sibling to you, or in the organizational chart, you can do that using a person query. But today we'll keep it simple with just me. There's another property here that's really interesting. I'm going to hit enter so you can see all this text. And I'm a little weird about that, so forgive me. There's a view. You can do a one-line view, a 2 lines view, which includes your name and email address. And I believe the other one is a 3 lines view. There's a couple of other options for views, but I can't remember them. So how would I find out what the other options are? Well, I'm going to copy this so I don't lose it. There's a button here called Docs. It'll take you to live documentation built in to this tool. So I see person query. Let's just define the name of the person for the component. Let's see, there's all sorts of stuff here. There's view. I can choose image only, 1 line, 2 lines. Cool. I can see some other properties. And if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I can see some examples of how to respond to events or how to switch this to be right to left instead of left to right. Even if I scroll down to MGT person within this playground, I can see all sorts of examples of other things you could do. So for example, if you just want to pass in a raw user ID. So I just want to show MGT person for somebody else in the organization. We could do that. What if I wanted to show a person card? I can do that. Person card if you click, or person card just if you hover. I can set the details of a person. So we have this Megan Bowen person here, and I have this class that says my person. I set the details. So that's interesting. Let's look at that. So the way it does that, it creates a constant called person, uses query selector to select this HTML element, and then it sets person.person details to whatever we want it to be. Well, I can do that, right? So I'm gonna go back to the canvas. I'm gonna say MGT person. I'm gonna make it a 2-liner. So view equals 2 lines. I'll close my tag. Going to create an ID. I'm gonna call this target. Then I'm going to create a constant here. Document.query selector instead of a CSS class of my person. We'll target. Display name. Instead of Megan Bowen, we'll say webinar presenter. Instead of mail, we'll say, I don't know, msusdev@microsoft.com. Remember, if you got questions after the session, msusdev@microsoft.com. This is my way of reminding you, right? I also have a hyperlink to our dev squirrel. This is a really fun picture we like to use. So I'm going to go in and say person.person image equals dev squirrel. And there we go. I built my own person component. So even if you don't want to use live graph data, if you just like that component and you want to fill in the data manually. So for example, I've done this before when I built a custom application to create a new user. We have a step where we say, okay, do you want to confirm that these details are correct before we commit them to the graph? I would do just this. I would use the same MGT person component, but instead of setting a person query, I just give an ID and I use JavaScript to set all the properties. And the user says, yes, I do like that. Then I would go to the graph, create the new user. And then the next time we show this MGT person component, I create a user. So lots of really cool stuff you can do with these components. Let me show you a couple other examples. If you wanted to see what people got going on, there's an MGT agenda. It's really cool. There's no CSS, custom CSS or JavaScript. This is the built-in look and feel. Of course, if you go to Docs, you can see that, hey, there's a lot of properties that you can set. If you go to style here, you can set custom CSS properties if you wanted to. You can re-template it. So this is the default template that's used for an event. You can create your own event template. So for example, this person for their agenda wanted to create a timeline element. Here's another one where you can click the events and have stuff happen. Or if you wanted the headers for each different date. Lots, again, really cool things you can do to customize these components. I'm going to show 3 more. Let's look at the file list. Somebody says for the managed MGT or Microsoft Graph Toolkit components, do we need to reference the JavaScript library? Hang tight, that's coming. Great question. All right, so MGT file list is the Microsoft Graph Toolkit component to put a list of files. Does this look familiar? This is our fictional user that we went to the Graph Explorer and we looked up there. Actually, I think I closed the Graph Explorer. Sorry about that. Let's sign out as myself and go back to our wonderful fictional user. And I believe for the file list, we got all the items in my OneDrive. So it's an attachments folder, a business data folder. And you see it here, attachments folder, business data folder. There's another Microsoft Graph Toolkit component called file if we want to just render a single particular file. So here we have a file for a South Asia expansion, PowerPoint file. And it looks like it did a file query. It went to my OneDrive, me/drive, same exact REST API relative URLs we use for Graph Explorer, items, and the unique identifier for this item. Let's do something fun here. I'm going to go to Graph Explorer. I remember when I went to my recent files, we saw that there's a Fabricum1 file. Here's the unique identifier for that. So theoretically, if I copy that and just paste that in my query here, my Fabricum1 OneNote notebook shows up as the file being referenced. So again, as a developer, if I want to query OneDrive and get a list of files and show it in my application, I can happily do that using the Graph Toolkit. And if my boss comes back and says, okay, we need you to redo the template, we can definitely create brand new templates. We can restyle them. We can use a dark theme, custom CSS properties, all sorts of really cool stuff here. So let me show you how to do a to-do list using Microsoft Planner tasks. So I'm going to do MGT tasks, and I'm going to go to my canvas. Here's MGT tasks. This allows me to interact with my tasks or add a new task. What if I don't want to do that? Well, read only makes it read only. So I can't interact with it at all. What if I don't like the layout of this? Because personally, this is just me. This looks kind of bad with the padding over here. It's not quite right. And why would I, if I'm looking for my task, why would I need an icon of myself for my task? They're my tasks. So I want to customize this. And so I'm going to get myself into a little bit of trouble. And so I'm going to go in, I'm going to say, MGT tasks. I'm going to use something called a template. Now, a template allows you to customize certain components of it. So for MGT tasks, they have a template. I'm not going to go super deep into this because we have a lot to show today. They have a template for tasks. So for every task, what do I want to show? Maybe I just want to show task.title. And I have the titles for each task. Maybe I want to see the raw JSON data. So let's do that. JSON, a stringify, task. Here's the raw JSON data for each task. Just for fun, I'm going to copy this, and I have Visual Studio Code open. Going to, I need to open it within the context of folder. Create a JSON file called demo.json and paste this JSON data in. This is my fault for having so many file create additions. Somebody said, can we get a link to the dev squirrel? If you go to github.com/msusdev, our organization, I think there's a repo called media assets where the dev squirrel lives. All right, I'm going to paste this JSON data in, format my document. And there we go. Lots of information. So every task has a title, okay? And then it has a group title and a folder title. I'm going to take advantage of that. So thank you, JSON data. Going to switch back to my browser. And so for my template, H1, task title. Maybe I'll do a paragraph element. Task.group title. And then maybe strong element with my task.folder title. And there we go. I have just completely customized the look and feel of the component to match my needs rather than the needs of whatever's going on here, right? And I can take it even further. You see me use this in many other webinars. I love Bootstrap. So I'm going to copy the style sheet for Bootstrap, paste that in here. That changes my look and feel a little bit. We're going to create a span. Class equals H2. Close that span tag. And create another span. Let's do a line break. All right. I'll create an unordered list. And then maybe I'll put each of these in a list item. I know I'm breaking some conventions here. So just that quickly, I was able to turn this from the default rendering to a list for just for my purposes. I mean, I could go further, add classes from Bootstrap, stuff like that. But I think right now I've illustrated the point that the templating features within the graph components allows us to completely transform the look and feel so that these components look native to our applications while still giving us a lot of advantages. You notice no JavaScript, no CSS. This is all off the top of my head. I mean, I can go even further. If you've done Bootstrap before, you've probably seen a Bootstrap card. Just paste in this example. And again, all these examples I'm showing you are on our GitHub repo. So please, jump in and take a look at it. And this is same example, but using cards from Bootstrap rather than an ordered list. So again, whatever my look and feel, whatever my CSS framework of choice, these toolkit components just natively integrate. One last toolkit component, and then we're going to get hands-on and actually try these toolkit components in a real live application or two. There's a toolkit component called get. What does get do? It gets stuff. That's it. It's amazing because if there's a graph query that I know of, and it's not represented by another component, I can use the get component to issue that query. So for example, I know if I go to me, or version 1.0/me, I get my profile information, my display name and my job title or my mail. Let's take advantage of that. So the get component allows me to jump in and say, it has lots of other properties. This is a pretty complex example, so I'll just keep it simple. I'll say my resource is me. I'm not worried about the version, scopes, or anything like that. This is just a single JSON object and not a complex query. I'm going to do a template. In this template, I'm just going to print out this. And there's the JSON data. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, format that. That's my profile information. I need the display name, job title, and mail. So I'm going to go back into this playground. I'm going to say, H1. Display name. Close that tag. I'm going to create a P tag. Job title. I'm going to create a horizontal rule. I'm going to create a hyperlink. Mail to, I think it's mail was the property for my email information. And I'll just print mail again. So this hyperlink will give you a way to email me, my title and my title and my name. So again, the get resource is really awesome because it allows us to just jump in, and get anything we want. I mean, this can get really, really interesting really fast. So for example, what if I want to get information about my photo? So I go to me/photo. I'm going to just do the same thing. And I'm showing you how to debug this on purpose. So as you play around, you'll come up with your own workflows. So there's my JSON data for the photo. It gives me OData, media content type, media E tag, an ID, a height, and a width. Okay, let's just for fun, let's print this ID out, right? So we're going to just jump back in and we'll just say ID. And to print out that this photo is a 240 by 240 photo. Now, just like when we do in the Graph Explorer, $value will give us the actual data for the image. If we print out this, you'll notice something weird. Nothing happens. Why is that? Well, since this is the actual photo, we need to change the type of data. So right now, the type of data is a JSON data. So type equals JSON. That's the default. I'm going to change this to image. And now we have our data image. So I should just be able to do this. Image source equals image. And print out my profile picture. I mean, they have some CSS in here. I don't care about the CSS. I'll create my own image, border style, solid border, color, black, border width, 5px, border radius, 35%. Let's take a look at that. Okay. It's okay. I can do better. Box shadow, 10px, 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 RGB with alpha. Want to make this black at about 50% opacity. Okay, that's much better. So I'm able to use that MGT get component with just regular CSS, really simple template, just pull any type of data from the graph and add it to my application very easily. So I promise that I show you how to do this in applications. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show you how we can do this in a vanilla JavaScript application, and I'll show you how we use these components within a React application. So let's start with a vanilla JavaScript application. I'll go ahead and delete this demo.json file. I don't need it anymore. I am going to open Windows Terminal, and I'm going to clone a project from Git. And I see a couple questions. I'm going to answer them while this is cloning. So git clone HTTPS, github.com, ms-usdev, example static JS app. I'll clone it to the current folder. So for those who, you probably recognize that. If you go to github.com, ms-usdev, example static JS app, this is the example app we used in the first session in this series. I'm going to go ahead and post this link in the Q&A for those who would like it. Now, this is just a really simple vanilla JavaScript application. If you run it, it has a button. You click that button and it prints to the console running. That's it. People ask, hey, can I use these components with like any type of server-side technology? So maybe I'm doing ASP.NET or Java server-side. Can I use this in my client-side? Absolutely. Just like you add in any other JavaScript framework, you can add this in too. Somebody asked, hey, can we, how do I reference the JavaScript library so I get access to these components? That's what I'm going to show right now. So we have our vanilla JavaScript application. I think this uses just HTTP server. I have a little bit of fun. I'm going to switch this to using live server. So npm install, save dev, live server. That way we make changes, it automatically reloads. Somebody asked, can we use the MGT components with Blazor? Takes a little bit more finagling, but yes, I have actually done that before. You can definitely use it intertwined with Blazor. Because remember, the MGT or Microsoft Graph Toolkit components are framework agnostic. So I'm going to run npm install to install any other dependencies this application has. All right. And I'm going to just jump back into this application. And right now, when you start this application, it starts HTTP server. Just switch that out with live server. So we get a nice little live reload. After that, I'm going to just npm start. And live server has started. For those who are here the first session, something about HTTP server and live server, it always launches the application in 127.0.0.1. You want to change that to localhost, because when you try to do the redirect, I'm trying to make sure I word this correctly. Azure AD will actually stop you from redirecting because your it's expecting localhost 8080 and not 127.0.0.1. So you want to make sure you do change that. All right, so this application, again, just a JavaScript simple file that when you click this prints out running. But we want to add the MGT or Microsoft Graph Toolkit components. So we're going to get rid of that JavaScript file and we're going to get rid of this run code button. So save and we're ready. Just to show that, vanilla JS bootstrap application, good old real-time updates, right? So to get started, I can go in and I can add in the script file for the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And I apologize for a little bit of confusion there. Remember, docs.microsoft.com/graph toolkit overview takes us to the Graph Toolkit landing page and gives us lots of documentation. If we want to get started, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, it says here, to get started, you really need these things. You need a script. And I'm using unpackaged for those who are not familiar with. It's a CDN that allows you to reference JavaScript files within an NPM package. That works perfectly for my needs. So I'm gonna grab that script file and plug it in. It's just going to the Microsoft MGT package on NPM. So if you go to npmjs.com, search for MGT, it's actually at Microsoft/MGT. MGT is short for the Microsoft Graph Toolkit. One of the cool things about this is, I clicked the wrong button. The MGT package consolidates the majority of packages within Microsoft Graph Toolkit. So the great thing about that is you only need to bring that in for most cases. Now, when we do React, React is an exception. It's not included in the Microsoft MGT package. When you reference it in React, you're going to reference a little bit different, but I'll show you that too. So once it shows the exact same setup stuff, go in, create a script tag, reference MGT loader.js, and then you can start using the components. So I will say MGT/provider. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We can use a SharePoint provider, a Teams provider. If it's a native application, SharePoint Teams, instead of building your own provider, you can just use the existing authentication mechanism. There's a simple provider and proxy provider, but for our purposes, we're going to use the MSAL provider. There's two of them. There's MSAL provider for MSAL 1 and the MSAL 2 provider. I'm going to recommend you use the MSAL 2 provider because a lot of our demos and examples are based upon that. Now, that requires a client ID. So I'm going to go back to the Azure portal and grab my client ID and paste that in. And then we can start using the tags. So I'll just say MGT login. Hit save. So if I did this correctly, it's reloaded. And look, my application is already there. I've already signed in, but I just want to show you the sign experience. So here, we'll do this. Let's sign out of this application. I hit sign in. I sign in with my account, and you see the full sign in, sign out experience. So that's it. MGT login is everything I need to connect this up. Now, if I want to go in and add some functionality, I can add MGT to do for a to-do list. Save it. And there's the basic to-do list. Somebody asked, hey, this overview page you went to, can you share that URL? I shared it a little bit earlier, Graph Toolkit overview, but I'll share it in Q&A announcement one more time because definitely hyperlinks are fun, right? We want to get as many of them out there and get you looking at the documentation and trying things out. So this is, as you saw, the default task list or to-do list view. Just like we did in the Graph Toolkit Playground, we could customize the template. So we can say, let's make this read-only. Save it, and the add button's gone, and I can no longer click on things. And I think this is my real to-do list. Luckily, it's nothing. I checked it earlier. It was kind of funny because some of the stuff we were doing. So I could build a template. Data type equals task. And I'm going to create, I don't know. I'm going to just start with task.title. Just be real simple right now. So I have all these task titles. I'm going to go to, let's do getbootstrap.com. Get started and components. Bootstrap has a list group component. I love it. So we're going to use that, where you basically have a list group and then list group items. And just from my experience, I believe you can use the list group components for checkboxes. So you have a list group item. So UL for list group, LI for list group item, and then inputs for the checkbox. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to just copy this. And I'm going to implement this here. So I definitely want to, and I'll walk through this one by one. I'm going to create a UL. That's going to be on the outside. You can even create a section if you don't want to create a UL. Let's do that. A section. That's going to be my list group section. Instead of an LI, I think I'm going to create a label. Label, class, list group, item. Now within that class, I'm going to create the input for the checkbox, right? So input class equals form check input, ME1. Type equals checkbox, and I'm just not going to set the value. So that should be good for what I'm trying to do here. And then I'll print out the task.title. So if I got that correct, got a nice little list of checkboxes, and I can click on them, and then I can handle JavaScript events on client side to decide what I want to do when you click on one of these tasks or to-do list items. So this is just the most basic implementation in a vanilla JavaScript application. Just a couple of reminders. All the code you see me typing in is on our GitHub repo. So you can definitely jump there and you can see for this session, all the codes samples that I'm typing in. Now, we've had a lot of fun. We built this vanilla JavaScript Bootstrap application, but I want to take it to the next level. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the live server, clear my screen, and I'm going to delete everything in this folder. So I'm going to close this folder with the Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go off screen for a second and just delete everything in that webinar dev folder. I know I'm killing all the fun, right? And once I delete everything in that folder, I'm going to just reopen that folder within Visual Studio Code again. And I'm going to create a React application. So npx, create React app, create in a current directory, a template. It's going to be TypeScript template. And I'm going to use npm as my package manager build tool instead of Yarn. This is going to take a second because it's basically creating a boilerplate for a React app that uses npm and TypeScript. Just so you can see Visual Studio Code. So it's doing the npm installs, adding the packages, it's doing all the fun stuff. Somebody asked, can we use GraphQL with the Microsoft Graph? I actually don't know. I'm going to look this up on another screen while we're waiting for things to install. If you got any other questions, please throw them in the Q&A right now. This takes about a minute. This is a great place for me to just jump in and answer any questions have. So I'm looking, and there is a documentation page about using GraphQL with different Azure services. I'm just looking to see if there's anything for GraphQL Microsoft Graph. I noticed other Azure services that use this GraphQL. So the person who asked if you can use GraphQL with the Microsoft Graph, please send us a question at msusdev@microsoft.com. We'd like to follow up on that for you because I don't know of any support for GraphQL, but GraphQL is popular and it's very useful. So that's definitely something we want to follow up and get you a more exact answer on. Again, just one more chance. If anybody has any other Q&A questions that they want to throw up, I'm just stalling just for a second so the boilerplate can spin up for React. I like to run the boilerplate because I like people to see I'm not doing any demo magic. I'm not tricking anybody here. So I'm going to go in and grab my client ID for my example application. It's setting up the sample project, and we're almost done. All right, so we have an example project. Everything's good to go. I'm going to install 3 npm packages. The first one, npm install, is Microsoft Graph Toolkit, or MGT. Excuse me, why do I say MGM? I hit enter. Now, the cool thing is when we did the client side, we just used Microsoft/MGT, and that's just an overall package that loads all the other packages that we need. However, for the React scenario, we're just going to grab the React packages, and we need to grab any other ones that we need for this application. For our situation, we only need 2 more. So we grab the MGT React package. The next ones we're going to grab is npm install at Microsoft MGT element. This is some base classes so we can do some configuration of things like a default provider, stuff like that. And then Microsoft MGT MSAL2 provider. Just like we use the MSAL2 provider with vanilla JavaScript, we're going to use that here. So we're going to install both of those. And then once both of those packages are installed, we are going to run npm start. Starting development server, and it's running localhost 3000 for our application. I'm going to just go ahead and copy this. And just for fun, I'm going to go back to how we had our little split set up. So somebody asks, hey, if we're using Active Directory, so Active Directory, the software running locally, rather than Azure Active Directory, how does that change our provider and what we set up? So the MSAL, Microsoft Graph, all that authentication runs through Azure Active Directory. So if your identities are federated through Azure Active Directory, then you're fine. There's no user change or experience to how you log in today. Everything runs through Azure Active Directory. If you are not federated through Azure Active Directory, then email us at msusdev@microsoft.com because there's going to be some a little bit more of a lift for things to happen. Somebody says, when we use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components, should we use the built-in authentication? Or should we build our own authentication mechanism using MSAL? Fun fact, when you use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit components, they're using MSAL to do authentication. So there's really no functional difference. And the cool thing about this is for your SPA, you don't have to add any authentication code to your SPA, but you can query the results of what these toolkit component runs. And then the other cool thing is there's lots of really great examples out there of people who are using both msal.js and toolkit components in the same application. They have a single authentication, and then if they need to just visualize something, they grab it with the toolkit. If they need to do something like using the Graph SDK for JavaScript to create a graph or make changes, they'll do that using msal.js and the Graph SDK. So there's a lot of harmony and lots of collaboration amongst all these libraries that you can build some really cool stuff. All right, so we have our React application. I'm going to just jump in real quick and just get started. I'm going to go in. Here's our index.tsx file and then our app.tsx file. These are the two files I'm going to edit today. So the index.tsx file, I want to import the provider. Just like we did with vanilla JavaScript, we need to import, I'm going to just start simple, from Microsoft MGT element. And instead of importing everything, I'm going to import specifically providers from that. That allows me to customize the default provider. That's why we brought in that library. Just like we did with the providers, we want a specific provider. So that Microsoft MGT MSAL2 provider library is going to give us the specific MSAL2 provider. And just like we did with vanilla JavaScript, we're going to configure that. So providers.global provider equals new MSAL2 provider. We're going to pass in some configuration data when we get started. So I believe our client ID, I'm going to paste that in. Oops. I need to go grab that client ID one more time. Apologize about making I jump back and forth. And then we can also pass in scopes, just like we did with MSAL. So for instance, we could pass in the user.read scope. We could pass in other scopes, like maybe calendars.read. And that's it. We've now configured any Microsoft Graph Toolkit components we use in this React application to use this MSAL2 provider by default. So awesome. That's all we need to do from the index perspective. Now, for our application itself, we're going to just jump in and just delete, save. Maybe I remove the logo. Hello world. Save that. Refresh. There's our application. We're going to go in and we are going to start implementing the toolkit. So we're going to just start really simple. We're going to import. And there's some questions coming in. I'm going to try and get to these Q&A questions after I'm done with the React demo. I just don't want anybody to think I'm forgetting them. So the MGT React library has the toolkit components. So let's start with the login component. So login, import that. I'm going to, let's see, H1, awesome React app, login component. A couple things I want to say about these components. They have the same names as the MGT components, except you remove that MGT prefix and they so the MGT hyphen. So this will be MGT hyphen login when you're doing vanilla JS. Remove that MGT hyphen prefix, then make it Pascal case. So save it, refresh. There's an awesome React app, and I'm already logged in. So if I want to sign out, sign in again, I could do it there. Let's print out my person information. So we're going to add a person component. I need to import that in. Save. There's my person component. But just like we saw when we were using the Graph Playground, I'm going to zoom in this in a little better. We need to pass it some person information. So that was person query, me. Save it. There's my person data. Remember, we wanted to set up the view. Well, I can do that here. Constant view equals, and I need to go in and import person view type, which is a enum. Person view type dot avatar, which is showing right now, 1 line, 2 lines, or 3 lines. Let's do 1 line. So view equals view. That's 1 line, 2 lines, 3 lines. Nice. So I have my profile information showing. Sweet. I can print out my agenda. I believe I have a call for audio engineer tomorrow. Let's see if that prints out. Uh-oh, I forgot to import agenda. Let's do that. Yep. I have a call with an audio engineer tomorrow. Let's continue to have some fun here. Instead of an agenda, I'm going to print out a to-do list. So hit save, and I need to import to-do list. No problem. Save it. To-do is 1 word. Apologize about that. Let's see if it. There we go. There's my to-do list. And just like we did with Vanilla.js, I'm going to customize this with an item template. So I'm going to create my to-do element. I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to call this item template. Now it takes in a parameter, which is properties. Now I know the type of these properties because I've done this before, but you can always F12 to go to different definitions. That's one of the cool things about using TypeScript within Visual Studio Code. But I'm looking for the type MGT template properties or props. Going to use that here. Get some really awesome, wicked awesome IntelliSense. Within my code, I'm going to say props.data context. I'm going to get the task for that. So constant task from props.data context. And then I'm going to return a span. And just like we did in the first demo today, I'm going to JSON.stringify my task so I can see what I got, what I got cooking here. So we got our item template constant. So I should just be able to say item template. And it's a task template. So I'll just pause it real quick before we walk through this. Basically, I create this constant and I use that as an element down here. It's this span, that's our template, and it's of type task. So it's pretty awesome stuff. So if I did this correctly, let me make sure I did this correctly. Refresh. There we go. There's my JSON content. So just like we did the last time. So we'll grab that. We'll create a demo.json file so we can see this really good. All right, so what do we have? We have a title, a status, body, date times, all that fun stuff. So if I go to Bootstrap and I wanted to create something really cool, I can create I don't know, let's create a list group, just like we did in Bootstrap, but we're going to add badges. So list group with badges. So it looks like the way we do this is we have a list group item and then a span class for the badges. So we have a UL for the list group and then a pretty complex list group item. So I'm going to just grab that, go back to my app TSX, and I'm just showing you like how we can create really sophisticated custom templates. So let's see. So my to-do is going to be a list group. I'm going to create a list group item. I'm going to return. I have my task. So I'm going to print out task.title. And then for the badge, I'm going to print out task.status. I need to say class name instead of class, since this is JSX for React. Save it if I did it correctly. What am I forgetting? Oh, I forgot to add the bootstrap. No worries. So go to bootstrap, hit get started, grab my bootstrap CSX. I'm going to go into my index.html file and add that. And forgive me for missing that. All right. There we go. We can do all sorts of stuff. Like for instance, this to-do class, if I hit F12, I can see to-do props, MGT to-do, lots of stuff here. Let's see if I can do a read only here. Read only. Save. And that we have our task list. All sorts of fun stuff we can do here. We can say for the individual list items, I want a little bit of padding between them, and maybe a little padding on the left. Oh, sorry. A little margin on the left, and a little bit between them. The margin on the left didn't quite work, but the little margin between them worked. So the idea here is that we can use a combination of the toolkit components, our own CSS, CSS frameworks and libraries to create really awesome applications. So hopefully I got to show you a lot of cool stuff. I want to show one more thing before we wrap up today. I'm going to just close a lot of this out. If you go to the link that we've shared in the Q&A multiple times, to github.com, msusdev, that's our GitHub organization, our Microsoft Identity Platform Dev repo. Matt's posted this link a couple times. I'll post it again. This repo will take you to all the show notes for every episode of this series. If you go down, discover Microsoft Graph Toolkit components. If you select that, you'll see all of our show notes for today. So you see all the stuff that was in our slides and all the templates that I went through today. All the sample code, everything you need to be dangerous, along with the script for creating your own boilerplate React application. I saw a couple questions in the Q&A that, hey, you talked about React and Angular, you talked about Vanilla.js, you talked about Blazor, you talked about using this natively within Office applications. What about support for other frameworks? So the Graph Toolkit is designed to be framework agnostic. However, I have not personally tested pretty much every framework with this. What you could do is you could go to the GitHub repo, see if other people has talked about using the Graph Toolkit with that framework. Again, since it's usable with Vanilla.js, you could just use it with any framework you want. However, you might find other people who are using it. So there's a Stack Overflow, GitHub issues that you can use. And there's all sorts of community places where you can go in and talk to people who are also using the Graph Toolkit. So that's aka.ms/mgt. I posted that link in the Q&A. Again, thank you everybody for your time. We'll just hang out for another 2 minutes to see if any more Q&A questions come in. I'm trying to answer your questions best I can, but just like we always say, I'm gonna pop this slide out one last time. Give people a chance if they have a question. msusdev@microsoft.com. If you have a question that I didn't answer today, msusdev@microsoft.com. Feel free to email us. We try our best to answer as many of the questions as we can. If we can't answer them, we'll get them to somebody who can. Matt, it looks like the Q&A is quiet. So again, this video will be published online on YouTube, and we have more sessions in this series where we use mstyle.js to connect directly to Azure and directly to the graph to do even more queries and do really more fun stuff. So we really look forward to seeing you all then.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sydney, and hope to see everyone next week. Take care.